Hi everyone, my name is Tiffany. Welcome back, or welcome if you've never been here before, and welcome to what I will be calling my April wrap-up. Now, I like to wrap up my books while I'm fresh off the page, so this will be done in clips, and we're gonna start with The Sex Witch by Sophie Lark, okay? I got this on her Patreon. It will be included in a future anthology, and I'm so excited to see her write more in this paranormal universe. We meet Evie on her birthday. We know that she's a magical being that has yet to come into her powers, and I hope it's not too much in me saying that this novella really showcases how all of that changes for her. It was very visual and visceral. I loved the look and the feel of the magic, as well as how she introduced the mechanics of it. Oh, this really read like a paranormal coming of age, and it also features vampires, and we learn why Evie's very resentful towards them. I love what that did in terms of her dynamic with Cain, who is a vampire that she has a lot of history with. She's very drawn to him, but chalks that up to their inherent monstrous nature. And I am so excited to see what she does with her newfound power, not just in magic, but in confidence, okay? Because there is a definite course of action that is charted out, and I loved this. I was living. It's absolutely 5 stars for me. I cannot wait for more. Next, I listened to A Walk in the Park by Rebekah Weatherspoon. This is an Audible original short with Steam, and we're following Janelle and Andre, who both hope to adopt from a local animal shelter, and due to a mix-up, they get paired with the same dog. So they agree to co-parent on a month trial basis just to see if sharing Zeus is even gonna work, and their romance starts from there. It starts out as a crush and grows a little deeper. I thought this was the sweetest thing. I also liked how they're both starting over after really traumatic breakups. And I thought this was just so cute. It was a short and enjoyable listen featuring 2 plus-size main characters. I love to see it. I had a good time with it. I rated it 3.5 stars. Then I was on Goodreads and I saw that Ashton from Ashton Reads had Never Have I Ever Gone Skinny Dipping by Hart on her want to read list. So I immediately jumped into it, and this was everything. This is an MM romance. We're following Mickey, who's very shy and awkward. He is a librarian by day, and by night, he writes MM erotica to break up the monotony of his very dull, what he perceives to be life. And he receives a prompt on a message board that is the title of this book. And he knows exactly what he's never done yet is burning to. It involves the one that got away. He had this relationship that was online prior to coming out with a man who he ran from in the past. And this message board prompt inspires him to ask out his current crush, Ronan, who's out proud, has a very sex positive podcast, and owns the cafe where Mickey secretly writes his erotica and is inserting Ronan into all of his heroes while pining. I love to see it. This was so freaking sexy, and sweet. They do end up dating, I will just say that, but I rated it 4 stars. I loved this. I absolutely loved it. He's concealing his identity all the while, and he's expecting his feelings to be unrequited because Ronan is really that heartthrob that's charming and turns it on for everyone, and I just loved this romance. It's short, it's a novella, and I absolutely recommend it. So I will be back when I've read more, and I'll see you in the next clip. I am back with a few more reads, and I am in the parking lot at work, so I apologize in advance for any, noise in the background. I will try and edit down that noise if I need to, but I feel like it's time to fill you in on what I've picked up since we last spoke, starting with Gentlemen Prefer Villains by Rochelle. This is the second of the series, and I absolutely love these MM super romances. In the second book, we're following Simon, who's a human. He is hired as an assistant by Wolfgang because Wolfgang is in pursuit of his missing sister after the events of the last book, and Wolfgang is the literal hand of death That is his superpower. Oh my God. And from the very beginning, even though Simon's hired as an assistant, he really ends up running everything. He's very forward and frank about how he would like things to go steam-wise with Wolfgang, and that is something that Wolfgang really wishes that he could entertain, but he can't do that without killing Simon. He can't be touched. He's a virgin cinnamon roll of a hero with this boogeyman of an ability within the super world. And that just made for very comedic and vexing banter between them, which I loved. I also loved how Wolfgang saw Simon as a tiny tyrant, you know, because of his small build, slick mouth, and no nonsense attitude. Simon was everything. And Wolfgang really is a cinnamon roll. Over the course of their time together, Simon starts to see how much of a golden retriever Wolfgang really is. He's loyal to his family, and he's really only concerned about their safety and upholding his duty and honor to them. Oh, it's just so delicious. So was the financial dominance between them. Wolfgang just really wants to take care of him. I also liked how in this book we got some reveals on how supers came to be, how heroes aligned themselves with humans that are in the political sphere, and how just some of the mechanics of this world works. The workaround when it came to Wolfgang not being touched was very interesting, and I ultimately gave this 4 stars. I will say that the first one is still my favorite, but I loved their dynamic in this, where they end up, and what Simon brings to Wolfgang in terms of, you know, Wolfgang may be this big boogeyman, he may be the hand of death, but he really just, you know, wants to take care of Simon and doesn't mind being dominated. He's a bit of a switch, but I just thought their dynamic was delicious. So I did have fun with this, and I rated it 4 stars again. After which, okay, I read Nobody's Duke by Scarlett Scott. This is 5 stars. I'm not going to bury the lead. I was shook, okay, by the drama. This is a second chance bodyguard romance, and we're following Ara. She is a duchess, and at the beginning of this book, she is mourning the political assassination of her late husband, okay? And so the crown has ushered in a bodyguard, and in walks Clay, who just so happens to be the true father of her child, the man she fell in love with as a young woman, and also one that she wants no parts in terms of him guarding her body. It was the drama of it all, okay? And Clay doesn't want to do the job either, okay? He doesn't want to guard the woman that he can't get past, the woman that thought that she was too good for him. I just had to know why. They were so angry. Oh my God, the angst in this was just so good. And what I love about a bodyguard romance is that it is the one profession where an employee gets to boss around their boss. And so I was just here for it. And as they're forced into this proximity and working relationship that neither of them want, we're getting flashbacks of how they met, how they fell in love, and getting the reveals on what happened. All the while in the present storyline, just the angst was like the how dare you make me still feel something type of angst. And he's building a relationship with her son reluctantly. And I just felt like this was so delicious. And when the reveals finally come to pass in the present storyline, I also enjoyed how they didn't waste any time. It was absolutely standout. I listened to this on Hoopla, and I was able to find all of the other books on there. So I'm so excited about Scarlett Scott. I'm here for it. I can't believe it's taking me this long, but I'm so happy that I read that. After which I read Come As You Are by Jess K. Hardy. This was a mature romance. I loved how the heroine is 46. She's a recent divorcee. She is struggling to keep her ski lodge open that was left to her by her father. And at every freaking turn, her abusive and dismissive ex is trying to buy it from underneath her. And Madigan is in his early 50s. He was once a grunge rock star, which he keeps on the low, but he is now the manager of a sober living. And I really enjoyed how alcoholics addicts and the stigma of hiring ex-convicts is really brought to the forefront in this book. I love to see that kind of representation in my books in general, but especially in a romance. And in this book, Madigan is proposing that she hire them for the season in order to get his guys some work. And she's really in a financial bind, up against the bigger ski lodges poaching her business and, just drowning in debt. And so she takes them on. I love how she was open in changing her mind about them, even though the optics for her business could be potentially bad. And unfortunately for her, she sees the dynamic between the guys in the home and Madigan, which I absolutely love the found family and comedic elements when it came to that. Their romance was a slow burn, and it's almost innocent because I loved this meditation for Ashley, where she was married for so long. She's a business owner. She's a mother. She plays so many roles in her life, but I love how she talks about it's been so long since she's felt desired. And so it made, all of the glances and the little touches between them feel like so much more. And I will say that although I enjoyed the representation in this book, I am, without over disclosing, very close to it. And so there were aspects within the story that did take me out of it when it came to Madigan's decisions in the third act. And I did feel like my attention was being pulled in a lot of different ways. She has a relationship with her mother who seems to be thwarting her at every financial turn. And there are storylines. There's time spent on the men in this home that I really enjoyed. But I did feel like I was pulled in every which way. Her ex is sharking around and causing trouble. So I enjoyed this. I did ultimately rate it 3.5 stars. And it was refreshing, again, to have like a mature romance. I did enjoy how ultimately she gets to start a second chapter in her life, forge her own independence, yet still have passion. I just think that that's a great message to have out there. And all the while, despite Madigan's insecurities about who he once was as a recovering alcoholic, she feels lucky to have him because of the way that he treats her. I loved that. So anyway, I rated it 3.5. I did enjoy it. And I think the things that I'm going to red hair as a reader are probably not going to be the same for the majority of the readers that aren't as close to the representation. After that, okay, the reason why I'm updating in my car and I'm ready with this lighting, okay, I read Scandals of the Father by, let me get her name right, I am so sorry. I was shook. I feel like this is going to be a new to me author. I have been told that this hero, who really read to me like a San Mariano hero, this was giving Mafia vibes. I know you can see it, but I want to make sure I'm getting the author's name right from me. And it's always important to try. Zoe Blake. Okay. Zoe Blake was giving me Mafia vibes. This is set in a small countryside town in Italy. The Cavalleries run everything, and Ronan is at the head of this family. And he was giving me San Mariano hero vibes because the moment that he lays eyes on Amara, who is waitressing at his son's wedding, that's it for her. Okay, that's it. What really strikes him are her sad eyes that are incongruent with her young age. And she had no choice but to give in. Okay, it was giving possessive. It was giving dubious. It was giving coercively cornering the heroine. He does eradicate a lot of her problems, but he's taking payment in the most devious way the entire time. And what I loved about this is that it has a caveat that I need particularly, okay, for my reading tastes when it comes to heroes like Ronan that quote unquote allow the agency of the heroine, just as long as all of their roads lead back to them. That kind of dominant, coercive hero, I need him to be willing to negotiate. And Ronan ultimately is after her happiness and aims to transform her sad eyes. And so I was here for that. He's willing to negotiate and he's after her happiness. And this also challenged another thing that I said that I didn't want to read this year, which were heroines that are struggling financially, yet unwilling to take the help of their billionaire love interests. I wanted no part in that because it has taken me out of the story. The simple fact that it is becoming increasingly expensive just to live out here. I cannot read that and not be parachuted out of the fantasy. Yet in this book, I loved Amara's fight and her spirit and how she explains to him that for her to allow him to step in would be for her to give up her autonomy. I love how she kind of administers her own sort of tutelage, explaining that like him, she too has a legacy, and the shanty home that he deems unfit for her is what her mother left, and to risk that in order to possibly fall on her and yet only be a means of entertainment for him is something that she cannot allow. The risk is far too high because the nothing that her mother was left with at the same crossroads that she's standing before when it comes to another powerful man, that nothing that her mother was left with because she was simply an amusement in the past is something that she's desperately trying to take care of. I loved it. I love that. I love that. I was like, yes, Amara, you tow him, you teach him, and it gets bonkers. You know, he is willing to negotiate. I'm not going to say much more than that, but I absolutely loved it and I rated it 4 stars. Okay. I was just gobsmacked. Okay. At the level of obsession. Okay. I mean, he takes it to a caveman psychopath degree and I was entertained. I was entertained and I'm excited about the rest of the series as well. He has sons. He's the type of billionaire that kind of gets his hands dirty. Anyway, I was here for Ronin, and now that I know that she has Bratva heroes that just make Ronin look tame, I'm so excited about it. So, that's what I've read so far. I will be back when I've read more, and see you in the next clip. I'm back, okay, and not as fresh as I normally would like to be, so we have a few books to get through, starting with If This Is Love by Julianne. Okay, this romance was heartbreaking in terms of their backstories, the reasons for why they are tied to this ranch. It is wild in terms of plot, messy and angsty when it comes to the dynamic and the reasons for why they can't be together. It starts out with Indy at 10 years old, and she has just lost the one person who's ever showed her love, her stepmother, her adopted mother, and she is left to endure the abuse of her stepfather, who bought her on a whim to bring joy to his late wife. He treats Indy like a gnat to be swatted. Her stepfather, quite frankly, is pure evil. He is the master puppeteer and all dance for him. No one more than, I will say, the hero Milo, who is his right-hand man, ranch hand, and quite frankly, henchman. Indy was adopted into this huge ranching empire, and after the loss of her stepmother, Milo is really her only respite. He really takes on the role of caretaking. They become inseparable, and oh my gosh, she quickly develops a crush on him that is returned later on as she grows up, yet as another way for Milo to endlessly pay the piper when it comes to his dynamic with Fletcher, that we're really in the dark. And at the beginning of this book, he agrees to an arranged marriage, and their romance continues from there. In this book, I was angry for them, with them, and at the entire situation, and I could not put it down. In fact, while I was reading it, Monica from Pardon This Book Addict came out with her review, okay, on her channel for this, and when she called it a cowboy mafia romance, I felt like that just rang true. Some of the events that happened in this book felt very mafia-esque, but at the end of the day, she kept me reading and I didn't want to get out of it. And it's not a book I see myself rereading, but I was incredibly entertained. I was invested and I was moved, so I rated it 4 stars. I did. Like, I had a good time with it. It was messy. I could not predict what was going to happen. Some of it was even like melodramatic, and I was here for it all. I don't know how she did it, but this one worked for me, because I'll be honest, in the past, Julianne has missed for me. This one somehow hit and I had a good time. After which, I did get into my book of the month pick, María and the Fox. I read the first chapter of this when I went book shopping, and María is the eldest of 3. She is a Mexican heiress. At the beginning of this book, her and her 2 sisters are just arriving in London to escape the French occupation. And under the very stern instruction of their father, they are meant to be hosted by their uncle and stay tucked away in order for their protection. Yet their uncle wants them to be present within London society. He wants them to be out at all of the events, the balls, the operas, so that London can have a face to Mexico while he's lobbying for political support. Now, Gabriel Fox is a member of parliament. He too is an outsider, being that he does not have the same upbringing as his peers. He is the son of a formerly enslaved woman, which is why his biggest aim is to abolish slavery. And so, although María is a political liability for him because they have garnered attention, not all of it good, he cannot look away. And so this is definitely a slow burn between them. And I will say the moments where María is caught in the prejudice of London society, Gabriel doesn't really step in order to shield himself because of his political pursuits. And because of that, this is a slow burn. And I do think that the plot takes the foreground where the romance really does take a back seat. And this is marketed as a marriage of convenience, but we really don't see that until the 3rd act. What I enjoyed about this were the familial elements. This is the first time her and her sisters have really gotten to know each other because all of their lives they were pitted against one another. And so I love the familial elements. I loved to be in a historical set in London that's not through a British lens. This really highlighted their prejudice, how they felt Mexico to be unworthy of their aid. And I loved those themes and those aspects. I would recommend going into this and expecting it to be more of a historical fiction than a romance, although I still did enjoy it. I'm rating it 3.5 stars. Now, after which, I finally picked up The Coldest Winter by Brittainy Cherry. This is the 2nd book from her that I have read. I loved The Holidays. I rated that 4 stars. I thought that was just so fun. And so I'm really interested in getting into more of her backlist, being that I'm hoping to meet her at Book Bonanza. This romance has heavy themes of love after loss and grief. And we're following Scarlett after she's lost her mother, which has really informed all of her life decisions. She's sort of living this life of honor where she has picked a major that she believes her mother would be proud of. She is dating the man that she thinks her mother would have wanted her to. And at the beginning of this book, she walks in on him cheating. And it's the first time her sort of prescribed way of life is disrupted, which leads her to go to a frat party. Okay, completely out of character for her. But you know, her friend gives her the advice to get under someone else. And that's where she meets Milo, who I just really enjoyed Milo and their meet cute at the beginning of this book, because this does turn into a one-night stand situation. Milo is very forward and frank about what he wants from her, which is a hookup. And this is really his coping mechanism for the very recent loss of his mother. But what I loved about their meet cute is that their connection is immensely felt. She can see something in his eyes, and that's also what disrupts the experience for Milo. Although it is unlike one that he's ever had, he really can't blot out his pain with it because he sees Scarlett. So I loved the beginning of this book, and neither of them are thinking that anything is going to come of it until they quickly learn that they will be forced into proximity when Scarlett takes a teaching assistant position, at the local high school where Milo is a student at, She's also going to be forced to tutor him into graduating. And I will say the aspects where they relate on their grief were incredibly beautiful. And I did have a tipping point when it came to my reading experience in this book, because I think a lot of it was done well. I enjoyed how much Scarlett adds to Milo, truly, in just paying attention, seeing him, investing in him, taking the time and making the effort. it really transforms his entire worldview. And I thought that this was really focused on Milo's journey towards healing that isn't linear, his tenuous relationship with his father. And there are just so many themes in this book that I felt like there were plenty of growth opportunities for them individually and as a couple, that there's a very strong choice towards the beginning of the third act of this book that I felt came out of nowhere. And I mean, if you follow my wrap-ups, my reviews, the way that I talk about books, then like, I hope you've caught on that I really value characterization over plot. I'm always looking for, like, in meditation, a message that I can personally attach to elevate my reading experience. And I think that this was an incredibly emotional book. I'm not a stickler for a lot, but one thing that I am is when I feel like something is gratuitously placed, and it felt like this choice towards the beginning of the third act was used as a device to really pile it on, and I didn't like that. Even though I can't speak to the representation, I can speak to it not feeling like something that I could get on board with, although I did enjoy the ending, and I did find this to be romantic between them. But I also felt like this is marketed as an age gap, which funnily enough, like, there were only a few years between them. The age gap is really felt in how different they are in terms of characterization. So it did read like one. I had a few issues with it, but overall, I just think that the theme of love after loss, the grief, there are some beautiful moments and quotes in this book that I cannot shy away from giving her props for, and there were other aspects that just didn't work for me. So I ultimately rating this 4 stars on Goodreads. And I mean, just like a sidebar, there are timestamps down below, you can skip ahead. I don't typically enjoy books that are set in high school, like, unless it's dark, okay, paranormal, or we're going on some fantastical quest. I need Euphoria High, okay? I need a book that's set in high school, books specifically, because I don't mind it when it comes to my television or film, but I need something to feel like a high school movie in the early 2000s, okay? They're never cracking open a book, their parents are absent, geek or popular, everybody has made their way to the party and they're turning up and dealing with themes and dynamics that would break a seasoned adult. Like, that's the vibe that I'm on. And so I'm just gonna throw that out there. If you're thinking about Rex for me and it's set in high school, I need high school to be a prop. And so I did go into the coldest winter really hoping that, like, he would be in high school and she'd be a professor. And so, like I said, there are a lot of aspects that I really liked and things that didn't work, but I'm interested in picking up more from her backlist because I've heard some incredible things about her emotional writing. So anyway, moving on to something a bit darker, something outside of the genres that I usually pick up. I read Killing Stalking by Koogi. This is a horror graphic novel, and oh my god, this was dark. It was sick. It was sick. This is following Yoon, who has developed an obsession that's led to stalking for Sang-woo, who is a very popular guy at his college. And that has led to him breaking into Sang-woo's home just to get a little bit more, just to get another taste, because he hasn't had a glance from him in a while. This also, like, this is trigger warnings abound. And this is a book where, like, you're seeing it on the page, which I loved the artwork in this, which is, like, odd to say because of the nature of what happens in this book. But when Yoon breaks into Sang-woo's home, he learns who his crush truly is, and it is twisted. He's held captive, and the things that he's made to endure were absolutely horrific. Horror is the right drama for this, but I did enjoy reading it. I don't know, like, what I'm saying. It was twisty and, like, psychologically thrilling, and it almost ruined Lauryn Hill for me because Killing Me Softly almost serves as, like, a leitmotif, if you will, like the villain's music in a movie. It ushers in Sang-woo's return, and it was terrifying. And so I will say I'm rating this 4 stars, and I will be picking up the next volume. I have to know more. I kept trying to make this a romance, this MM situation, and there is some dubious consent in this book where Sang-woo takes advantage of Yoon's interest. There's a lot of body horror, so I mean, I'm here for it, which is weird to say, but I'm also at the point right now, after picking up my first horror towards the end of last year, trying to hone in what works for me and what doesn't, because I do think I'm well versed in that when it comes to romance, and it's kind of nice to chart out to different genres and figure that out. So I've been having fun. Next, I read, and I'm going to check on my Airtable because it has been a while. I apologize. Like I said, I'm not as fresh. Next, I read Sweat and Soap. I loved this. I'm absolutely obsessed already. This is a romance and it's workplace. It has a really interesting setup, being that Asako works in the finance department at this soap company. And we learn very early on that the entire routine of her life is centered around masking her smell. She sweats profusely. She uses all of the soaps in these scents to cover that up. Her breaks, the clothing that she wears, everything is centered around that. And at the beginning of this book, Notori clocks her smell, and it is the most humiliating thing for her and the biggest elation for him because he loves it. He is the man that's responsible. He is the inventor of all of the scents and the soaps that she loves so much. And so I just thought, like, him being so captivated by her smell places her in a vulnerable position, and it also is inherently intimate. And I just love how Notori is gone for Asako in this book. I loved the communication between them because, again, it places her in a very compromising position to confront the one thing about her that she finds to be displeasing, and it's everything that he loves about her, and he just cannot get enough. Of course, they're sneaking around, keeping this research from their separate departments, and I'm just so interested in getting more of them because it's so sweet and heartfelt. I cannot wait to get more into their backstories and just follow along. So I feel like I'm on the manga train, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous because I'm not getting enough in one volume, and now I need to pick up the next one, and I'm like, how much money am I gonna actually spend? That's what I'm like worried about. I am so worried. So I'm gonna have to try to find some manga like that's on Kindle Unlimited and get that going. If you have recommendations, please sound off below. I'm definitely gonna be following along with Sweat and Soap, and I will be, picking up more Killing Stalking. But I love Asako and Notori so far. It is a very odd concept, but it works. I'm not going to try to crack it. Next, Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant. And I've recently learned that Mira Grant is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. I love Seanan McGuire's Wayward Children series. I'm obsessed. And I first saw this novella on Riley Marie's channel, and it kept popping up for me. Like I said, I've been trying to discern what works for me within horror, and all things sci-fi have really done it. And this is a sci-fi horror novella that is about a team of scientists who set out to discover the existence of mermaids. And it is told through a broadcast that is reporting on their voyage that never returns. So going into the book, you know where it's going to end. And also, I kind of liked that we do have scientists aboard, but this is also a documentary that they're going to be filming. And this documentary company is more focused on the entertainment and don't really believe that they're going to find mermaids, but they definitely plan on entertaining. So you have performers on this ship, you've got scientists on this ship, you have a sort of showrunner, if you will, and reporter to steer the events that are happening. And I just loved the slow unraveling of the very scientific and practical way to make sense of all that they discover. And it's terrifying. I love how the mermaids are depicted in this book. I was on the edge of my seat. I also liked seeing the different perspectives of their encounters, with what's happening. I rated this 5 stars. I feel like I can't say anymore because I don't want to give anything away, but I think the structure, the way in which it's told through this broadcast really worked for me. And also like the very deep dives into particular characters that represented like their group aboard. I loved it. It worked. So I have to pick up more Mira Grant. I'm so excited. Next I read You're Invited by Amanda Jayatissa. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And this is a thriller that I started listening to through the Libby app, cut me off, and I had to go into the library, fix my account, and get the physical copy and my audio back up and running. I loved how this opened. This book starts out with María desperately trying to get out of her hotel room at a wedding that never happened because the bride is presumed to be dead or missing. We learned that María was attending her ex-best friend's wedding. Her ex-best friend who's marrying her ex-boyfriend. At the beginning of this book, María is in LA. She's been estranged from Koogi and also stalking her on social media. Koogi has a big online presence, being that she's a bit of an influencer. And when she learns of this upcoming wedding, she's hell-bent on stopping it. I love a messy friendship on the page. That's exactly what we're getting. There are a lot of secrets that are being unlocked through an interview sort of style. The wedding is set in Sri Lanka, which I absolutely loved. I hope she doesn't mind me saying, but I was talking to chapters of Cheryl, on Instagram, and she called this like the Real Housewives of Sri Lanka, and it was definitely that because we're dealing with very wealthy 1% population type of wedding when she arrives, and it's just all of the drama, all of the tea, all of the messy generational gossip and dynamics. This was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. There are dark themes and there is a potential murder, being uncovered, but because they have the juice, a private investigating company is stepping in before the authorities, and so we get this through interviews and flashbacks that really unfold what happened, that tell the story of why they fell out as friends. There were a lot of twists and turns. And again, I just had a lot of fun with this. There were things that I could not predict. And even the last paragraph of this got me. So I ultimately rated it 4 stars. I had a good time with it. It was messy. It was drama. It was giving. It was giving. I loved the setting. I loved the cultural lens through which it was told. This was everything. I had such a great time. So I'm happy I picked it up. I need more thrillers like that. And because I was feeling that vibe, I picked up So Happy For You by Cecilia Lasky. This is also a thriller featuring a messy friendship set at a wedding. I'm sorry I do not remember their names, but this is following 2 best friends that have been estranged, one of which is being called in to be the maid of honor for a friend that she had a falling out with. And really the thriller aspect of this doesn't come in until later on in the book. We're following an unlikable main character, learning how their friendship developed, how they were inseparable, codependent, and the reasons for their falling out. And I think a lot of this book, why I really enjoyed it, it was unexpected because I was anticipating the pacing of a thriller throughout, but this really follows our future maid of honor, if you will. That's just going to be a placeholder because I don't remember her name, as she is coming to the realization for why she's pushed away so many in her life. And I really like how that realization is balanced. Because yes, she's unlikable, she's very forward, she's queer, she's frank, and she's at the age where she's just unapologetically herself. And I could get behind that. I really could. And also with the balance in her taking in where she could be a little bit more open. And so she decides to go and support her ex-best friend. And her friend's behavior takes a sinister turn. And the events that happen at this wedding start to get a little twisty. We do know from the beginning that this is going to be a story told about 2 friends who are led to wanting to kill one another by the end. And I don't know what it was about this book. There were very high stake and dark moments that were just comedic to me. I don't know if I was supposed to be laughing, but there were like life or death situations in this book. But because of the way that it's told and because of the things that they are thinking, I was laughing out loud. So I did have a good time with this. I rated it 4 stars. And it was like a way to assuage that messy friendship wedding vibe that I was here for after You're Invited. Lastly, I read From the Embers by Ali Martinez. I honestly have had this recommendation on my TBR for so long because of Caitlin from The Love Librarian, and I finally picked it up. Oh my gosh, we're following Eason. We learn at the beginning of this book that his marriage is in trouble. He has a newborn. He and his wife Jessica are not getting along. They're being pummeled financially. In juxtaposition to his best friend, who's killing it, okay, when it comes to success, and married to Bree, who, you know, Eason really doesn't get along with. Bree doesn't see him as a provider and good enough for her best friend Jessica. Yet he wants to give his wife a night out. Can't afford it, and so they plan to go to his best friend's home. And there a freak accident occurs, a fire ensues, and Eason barely gets out with his life and thinks that he's saving his wife and instead rescues Bree. And so this is really a romance where they trauma bond on their great loss. And Eason ends up moving into Bree's pool house. They start to co-parent and heal. And the reveals and the twists and turns when it came to the plot, how messy grief is depicted on the page, I absolutely loved, okay? This is a slow burn where Eason starts to see and appreciate Bree, and Bree starts to see the true man that he really is when it comes to being a father, loyal, consistent, supportive. Oh, this was such a beautiful romance between them, and how their grief lingers, I will say, because I can't give anything away. I was over here shook, okay, and mad for them. I just kept thinking, how much more can they endure? How much more can they take in this book? And they're doing it together. The way that they blend in with one another and just the routine that they forge together and how they are trying to start this new chapter in light of all of the intel that comes out in this book was just beautiful. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, the plot is wild. It gets very bonkers in the end, okay? Which, you know, had a little thriller aspect, so I wasn't mad at it. I ultimately rated this 5 stars because at the end of the day, I loved their romance. I absolutely loved their romance. And this had like a meditation on grief in a very angsty way. The angst came from external conflict as opposed to internal between them, which is how I really like to see it done. Okay, so I loved this. And with that, I do think I'm going to wrap this wrap up out here. I can already tell because of when I am filming this that it will be coming out late, so I apologize. I'm gonna give you the rest of what I read for the month of April in my monthly stats video. I do plan on coming out with a vlog for the novella-thon, and if you don't know, I don't talk about any of the books that I discuss in vlogs because I'm already long-winded enough. So I will be wrapping up April soon, okay? I'm reaching about a week out, okay, at this point, so I know I'll have more reads to tell you about, but I want to thank you for joining me. Please consider subscribing and sticking around, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.